welcome everyone to this webinar for PRGX. Today's webinar, how spend analytics complements a recovery audit. So aggregating, cleaning and classifying spend data from multiple decentralized systems can be challenging without the right resources. However, once you've gone through the rigorous process of creating a single source of truth, you can begin to interpret the patterns and anomalies that visualize your revenue leakage. So today's webinar will outline how organizations can utilize recovery audit data to gain improved visibility into their spend, the benefits of using your recovery audit data for spend visibility, and some examples of real-time reports you should expect to run. So just before we jump into the speaker introductions, just a few housekeeping items. You can let us know through the question box if you're having any issues seeing the slides or with the audio. In the same box, you can also ask any questions throughout the webinar, and we'll look to come back to those at the end. And lastly, you can follow PRGX on Twitter and LinkedIn to get alerts of more of our upcoming webinars, and also receive alerts on our on-demand series that we have created previously. So now to introduce the speaker. So we have Jen Rowe on today. Jen is our Chief Analytics Officer here at PRGX, also a veteran of our webinars. He's appeared on a number here in recent months. Jen's built an award-winning source-to-pay and analytics platforms with Accenture, McKesson, and Seal Software. And his role is on generating actionable insights to customers that aid in incisive decision-making, utilizing the latest techniques in the field of data science and BI. So Jen, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it. Good afternoon, everyone. So we'll be talking about spend analytics and recovery audit and how these things tie together today. And really, it's going to be about the access to data, about leveraging data, how they really kind of start to, the values and the information and the insights really start to complement each other, and what you can gain from that process. And so we'll just go over this very simple agenda items. And really, you know, I joined PRGX last year, and really I came in with a promise of this wealth of data, right? This leading recovery audit firm that has access to all sorts of really interesting and valuable data, and the investment and the technology platform to make that really available, so that people like me can now jump in and actually tie that all together and generate insight. So, and I'll say that, you know, it hasn't disappointed. It's been really exciting and interesting to be able to create a path and analytic strategy where all these information is available in a way that really makes the insights come alive and makes it really accessible. So we'll talk about how they really come together and complement each other. And being a, you know, industry at this point, a veteran of you know, solving large enterprise challenges, and spend analytics almost always being this foundational baseline element as a starting point for many of the larger enterprise challenges. I think it was important to really dig into that and show how they all tie together and some of the interesting things that arise from that. So let's spend just a few minutes on recovery audit. It was sort of new to me, actually, even until last year, that this existed, this was available, but the value is sort of undeniable. PRGX actually on an annual basis recovers over 1.2 billion annually for customers. And, you know, I've seen it in action. It's a tremendous level of details that our auditors dive into, looking for duplicate payments, overpayments, a lot of credits that are missed because, you know, thresholds weren't hit or thresholds weren't calculated correctly, missed discounts, missed allowances, rebates. Auditors digging through, you know, in a both manual and automated manner, emails, because a lot of transactions happen over emails, right? A lot of things that you may have agreed to in the past via contracts or terms, you know, oftentimes in real life need to be adjusted and changed because things happen and things need to move quickly. And I think you've all had experiences of lots of things changing over email. So how do you capture those, and how do you make that available as part of the process? And our auditors do a great job of even utilizing that data to pull in, to look for the discrepancies and look for things that should have been paid this way versus the way it actually was paid. Pulling in contract data, labor rates, and all sorts of different sorts of information put all together make for a successful audit process, because, the whole point is to compare what should have been paid versus what was actually paid and find those gaps. And one most important thing about the audit process is that it recovers real cash value, right? These aren't some hypothetical savings where it's sort of, hits you in the books, and you have to sort of calculate how much savings you should have gotten from each piece of, 10 minutes saved here or 15 minutes saved there. No, these are actual cash saved, because we're going directly back to the vendors with the information and getting those claims submitted and getting those cash back. So the value is even greater. So then, if the recent trends of digitization, automation, lots of platform solutions around ERP and S2P, so why are there still so many errors? And I think we all know the answer to this. Although all of these trends have really made our lives easier, the quality of data has improved, the process becomes just easier and easier every day, and you have firms throwing RPA at automated tasks and making sure that, selective AI and machine learning components are improving how we do things. But if we all take a look at our current day-to-day lives and our current company and our data infrastructure and our data flow and the access to the data we have, I think we'll all see very, very quickly and very clearly that, except for a very, very rarefied few, the number of disparate systems, especially across the organization, by process steps, by countries, acquired through M&A, can you even count how many systems you have in your company? Do you even have visibility or access to all of them? And my guess is going to be no. That's just what I found through interactions over and over and over throughout the years. And then the data flow from each of those systems, from one to the next, to the next, to the next, and even kind of parallel processing and cross-joined, man, it's a really difficult thing to do. And I'll say, it's rarely done correctly, rarely done in a way that, you don't have any gaps or you don't have any one-offs, and ones that really handle change quickly and well. I mean, all of these really oftentimes lead to exceptions, manual edits, and I'm sure we all have experience dealing with that. And then the process always comes into play, the people, the process. Once you have a sort of an inconsistent and sort of disjointed process, let alone new people coming in, or let alone people combining, processes across multiple functions and multiple systems, it just becomes a difficult communication. All the data doesn't flow through correctly. And of course, now when you're handling lots of different exceptions, now you're fighting for time and resources to get all of those solved and reported correctly, which are all, very difficult tasks. And as we all have seen, things change quickly. Systems continue to come out. Vendors continue to emerge that have new ways of doing things, a better way of doing things. And, it's rare when a company makes a complete overhaul of all of their systems, right? Oftentimes, it's an insertion of different bits and pieces, which then have to be retrofitted and handle legacy processes and legacy data points, and have to now tie together an old system to a new system to an old system. And we all know how that goes. It's a very painful process. It's a long process. And if you're going through that, a couple of times every year, it can be a very challenging thing to stay on top of, making sure that the data flow is correct. And then, very simply, at the end of the day, there's just so much data, right? And of course, our computing power and the technology is improving to hopefully help us deal with that. But it's still an incredibly challenging task to handle and deal with this so much data, as it's just, as it's exponentially growing all around us in multiple systems, and we're capturing all, vast amount of information that we've never captured before. And again, the systems are running faster and hopefully running smoother, but the data definitely becomes overwhelming. And, as an aside, how many of you have gone through or are aware of, it used to be called data warehouse projects, and now it's data lake, and I sometimes now hear data ocean, and then I'm sure it's going to get to something bigger, data atmosphere, data galaxy. I'm sure it's going to get just larger and larger to, really reflect how much data we actually have, right? And the question is, in many of these projects, have your challenges, your specific challenges, or some of your enterprise challenges, have they been effectively solved by these initiatives? And in many instances that I've seen, the answer has been not quite, because oftentimes when you're joining, it sort of becomes sort of a dumping ground, right? And I don't want to, disparage it, because those are important projects to really get a handle of all your data. But too much, it's not thoughtfully joined as the data comes in. Oftentimes, it really is just, I'm going to take the data from all these different places, and I'm just going to place it here. And the people who need to use it will know what to do with it. But that's a difficult thing. And so when you're not putting the data together in a really designed and architected and thoughtful way, where the data really do join together and have a correct data model to allow seamless access across all of those different data sets, it can be a very, very challenging thing to use correctly and use accurately. So again, the perils of data, right? So in the times of, all the quarantine currently, one of the things I've been doing a lot is with the kids. I have two little kids, 10 and 6, and we've been doing puzzles. And it's a great way to spend time with the family, do something, off the screen. I know all the kids want to jump on the screen and spend all day on it. So one of the things that we like to do is puzzles, right? And oftentimes it really just, every time I'm doing a puzzle, I'm thinking about how the data sets fit together and tie together in the clients that I'm working with, and even our own. And the idea here is that, when you are putting together these data sets, you wish they were like puzzle, where they fit together and they have a place to go and everything ties together. And again, the goal here is to put everything together, but problem is, too many times, number one, you don't even know how many pieces that you are starting with. Like if you knew exactly that you had a 200-piece puzzle or a 400-piece puzzle or a 1,000-piece puzzle like Amazon has, it's easier to have a target and be able to kind of make sure that you're addressing each of the pieces and making sure that you're tying them together, and hopefully, like a good puzzle, they fit tightly together and they're all completely aligned, and you see the final picture at the end. But the problem is, number one, you may not know even how many pieces there are, and number two, essentially you don't know what the picture on the box actually looks like. What if you have to go into a blind? Because you only see your piece of the puzzle and each of the ones you find, but you don't see the whole picture yet. That can be an incredibly difficult thing to do. And oftentimes that's what we're doing with data. We're trying to tie together things where we don't know what the end result could potentially look like. You have a vague idea of it, and you don't even know what's available and how much you can put together. But again, that's the goal, and that's a challenge, right? That's the first step. And then to make the matter a little bit more difficult, you have situations like this where the puzzle pieces don't quite fit together, right? And we all have experienced data sets that we wish just tied together better, right? Where there is no gaps and there isn't a mismatch because one has it, at a different level of data of granularity than another one, and they just don't quite fit together. So again, these kind of situations constantly are giving us an incomplete picture, gaps in the data, and in worst case situations, you have an inaccurate data set, and that's the worst, right? And so another perspective here is that not only are these puzzle pieces spread all over the place and you're trying to gather them all, and people are looking at different bits and pieces of that puzzle piece, right? People from different departments, different countries, different organizations. You're looking at your own piece of the pie, and I've been in so many conversations and so many engagements where I'm talking to different people in different organizations, and their perspective of the data, again, they should all match together, is completely different, which actually brings up just a quick, Indian parable. Some of you may have heard of this. It's when an elephant was brought to a village that had a group of men that could not see. They wanted to really get a sense for what the elephant actually looked like, and they do that by feel, right? So these folks were really trying to get a sense for what the elephant looked like, and essentially one was at the trunk would say, you know what, this feels like a big snake, and another one would be at the tusk and it looks like a spear. Another one would be touching the ear and it feels like a fan. The side of the body feels like a wall, the feet feel like a tree trunk, and the tail feels like a rope. So really, depending on what your perspective is and where you are in the world, in this data world, you could be looking at the same thing, same situation, same picture, but your perspective might be completely different, right? And so that's one of the key challenges that we try to solve. And so here, just summing up the pictures here, end goal, always, it's for data analytics professionals or people who are trying to do their sourcing jobs or category managers or contract professionals, whoever you are. At the end of the day, your goal, what you really need to solve some of your major challenges is to put together that holistic picture of your organization, of your process, of your data, how they all tie together. And especially, it's a great thing when all these different groups can have a single source of truth and see that it all ties together very, very nicely, very cleanly. And that is really the path that we're going to go follow through, because in the case of recovery audit and spend analytics, that's the kind of the complementary path that we have. That is basically the joint common purpose that we're trying to achieve that really helps us do our work. And so in this case, spend analytics, really, we're going to ask you, and you should be asking yourself, you have so much data. How do you currently today find your answers and solutions? When people come to you with challenges of, we think there is, the discrepancy between these set of invoices and what we signed up for, or the contract, or the terms, or how the performance is actually going. What do you do? Where do you go? How do you get those answers and solutions? Do you know where to look? Do you have the necessary technology and expertise? And are you able to do that quickly? And are you able to do that from this, codified single source of truth, this whole picture that you have and this access to the right data? Or are you going out and scrambling to gather these information from different sources, different people, different experiences, and trying to put that together? Really, that's the incredibly difficult part. And so for us at PRGX, the thing that I'm grateful to leverage is our recovery audit process and the wealth of data that process brings to the table. So on the right, you have this picture of our new Veragon solution suite that we've recently launched, and it's built up of many layers that really work together. The bottom line is it's this purpose-built, massive data technology that allows us to ingest all sorts of disparate data sets from our customers, put that together in a meaningful way very, very quickly, create the right data models, and then get to the top layer of being able to get to the results, the insights, the summaries, the findings, the gaps in the opportunities, the quantification of all of these different elements, so that you guys can focus on using the data and doing your job instead of going and searching, finding, joining, cleaning up, normalizing, categorizing, and doing that on an ongoing basis just so that you can answer the next question that comes to your table, right? So really, that's the goal here. That's really the bottom line, that the audit data really works together with my spend analytics goals and all the future advanced analytics goals, which I'll talk about in a second, and allows us to really join forces and create this common path forward, which makes the entire process stronger in complement. All right, so let's take a quick look at what traditional spend analytics look like, and these are normally what you find in the marketplace today. And this is essentially what I did for last dozen years, right? It's let's first, whether we're doing this internally whether we're using a partner to do it, whether we're buying something off the rack, or whether our ERP partner happens to have a solution that does some of this. Really kind of the traditional spend analytics now is fairly straightforward, right? They're pulling together the accounts payables and hopefully they're putting together the right POs to the invoices, to the payments, and they're ingesting and consolidating all of that, mapping it, categorizing the spend, normalizing the supplier, creating a parent-child hierarchy. Hopefully that's all being done. And then that's being put into a visual mechanism and hopefully it's well designed and it's interactive and it's fast, and where you have access to all of your invoices and payments throughout time, or at least few years anyway. Who, when, how, being able to look at any combination of suppliers, categories, regions, companies, BUs, functions that you need. Being able to highlight some of the key trends and risks. A lot of things start with year-over-year trends. Where the single payments, round value payments, invoice spikes, authority limits, things that people approved or bought, that should have been bought on, P cards, but were bought using an invoice instead. Single-use vendors, single-use purchases, things like that. Preferred spends and vendors. How much of my spend is under management? Who are the vendors that we've negotiated with over the last few years, and thus we consider well managed, and we have a running contract with them, and the spend falls under those deals. Cost and efficiency of transactions, right? We're currently running a lot of our payments through our check cutting, for example, still, and how much is that costing us more than our EDI transaction? And these are some of the really simple stuff that you should be getting into to make sure that your process is aligned, that you're running things as efficiently as possible, and that you're measuring and quantifying some of the key gaps and opportunities. So this is what, hopefully what you've seen as traditional analytics look like in some shape or form. Some of the components can be swapped in and out, and some companies do one of these things better than others. But this is typically what it looks like. And at PRGX, one of the things that it allows me to do is we can start with the audit data. Well, because the audit data is this, wealth trove of essentially you're looking for, payment gaps and overpayments, and, compare what we paid versus the rate cards that we have available, and compare, what we paid versus the contracts, and check through the emails to make sure that, the right rebate thresholds were, that was changed or is achieved. These are all things that are available to us now without having to go search and hunt and peck. And so it's number one, it's just a great accelerator to getting to this data and helps us get going. And then at the end of the day, not only do we get to, number one, join those pieces of data together. What are we doing in audit? And what does the overall spend look like for our vendors? Now we get to really follow this value chain of being able to add additional capabilities and functionalities on top of that very, very quickly. Being able to measure your working capital optimization and DPO modeling, being able to find consolidation targets, where we have a long tail and lots of one-off vendors, where are the areas and categories where it's ripe for consolidation and, product harmonization and spend harmonization. So where is that? Finding those. Contract overview. We have contract data. So now we can show you at the vendor level, how much claims do we have? How much spend do we have? How many contracts are we running? When are those expiring? What are some of the key terms that we may be interested in? So you can imagine being able to really start to put those side by side. Category specific insights. The platform allows us to really start bringing in lots of additional category specific data, like, in temp labor and travel and logistics. They have their different sets of rate cards and data that, becomes fairly valuable. And then we get into really the kind of the difficult topics, advanced analytics, where we're doing like-for-like product grouping. And I'll just give you an example of the values of that in a second. True net cost harmonization, looking for price variances if you're a retailer in your items. And if you have goods that you're buying from vendors, storing in warehouses and shipping to your stores, just knowing where that is, knowing that what we ordered is what we got and what we got invoiced, just that simple matchup, these are some really valuable things that, again, we can leverage our data for, and it becomes an incredibly powerful platform to really, start your spend analytics journey, right? So moving on, this picture sort of represents my world and what we are able to do, because we are partnering our analytics and our spend analytics and our advanced analytics with Audit. Audit data really allows us to have access to this wealth of data for our customers. And with that, we put that through our purpose-built, analytics platform, which is a combination. And when I say platform, it's certainly a combination of process and people and technology, right? It's not just the technology, but the big thing is we have this investment that we made that allows us to access large sets of data, and we use in-memory analytics that allows us to, match things and data model things incredibly efficiently. We have a rapid development application that allows us to get things out in a couple of weeks instead of months and quarters. A set of data scientists that are helping us utilize machine learning to really solve some complex things, and AI and machine learning support where we need it, and I'll give you some examples of that in the future. But again, the goal is we're now able to not only solve the simple spend visibility challenge and spend analytics and our audit performances and putting that together, that's sort of a given. Now we're able to solve even more complex challenges, which I'll show you some examples of what we do. So starting simple, right? Obviously we have audit data, and so one of the first things, this is the basic out of the box thing that we of course start doing, is we need to report and show what are the audit performances, which vendors have generated what kind of claims, and how much and how often. These are things that we get into, of course, immediately, and what status are these claims in? They've been generated, they've been sent to our vendors for claims submissions. These are the ones that they've agreed, and these are the ones under research, and these are the ones in the past that they've agreed to, and there's a payment, a back payment coming, right? So these are the things that we start with. But then, of course, when you're talking about that information, we have access to those invoices, those vendors' invoices, their payments, their recs, their POs, which function did it belong to, which business unit, region, all the traditional spend analytics, measures and calculations and visualization certainly available. We start with that, and then we start moving into the more interesting elements where, okay, so how many of these vendors have been negotiated and managed in the last, let's say 2 years at a threshold, and we can start marking those off in green so they're under management. Start highlighting for me in this category the vendors that, number one, either are single spend vendors, and we need to look at how we start to manage and manage those out, and also vendors where we have spend that is essentially considered unmanaged because we haven't done anything with them in the last few years. These are some of the tactical questions that we can help you answer very quickly, very visually, in a data-driven manner. And just as an example, and of course, in a demo setting, we can show you all the different capabilities and functions and measures that we provide as sort of our starting point for our spend analytics. But just to give you an example of the kind of the interesting things that come up when you start even joining the audit, recovery audit functions and the value that we get from that versus looking at just their spend, right? Let's say you're looking at vendor A, and they provide us multiple categories of services, but let's say we're just looking at professional services spend. We spent $137 million with them last year. And what the recovery audit activities show is that actually 13% of that entire spend is actually linked to number of claims, right? So our auditors went and found that these invoices and these payments had some discrepancies and had some issues. Those have been flagged. We found them. Now we can see, 13% of their overall payment had some issues. That's quite a bit, right? And now we're able to even follow that down. And basically, there's a submitted discrepancy of $750,000 across many different issues and types. And now we know who we had issues with, what type of issues we had with, how frequently, when. And now these are elements of data that allows us to take additional action, allow us to look into the process. Why did this happen? Becomes a really interesting thread to follow. All right. And then we gave you examples of how we kind of continue to move down using that data. This is an example of how we do DPO and working capital calculation. There's another webinar just dedicated to this topic. This is one of the ones that we started with because it's something that, especially in today's market, it's an important topic. How do we manage our cash flow? How do we manage our vendor payments and make sure that we are paying what we're supposed to? And, just to give you a little bit of a summary from that point, really, if you're paying your vendors at, let's say in this case, 13 days, and, based on all your contracts, your vendor master terms, you should be paying closer to 30. Well, essentially what you're doing is you're giving your vendors a interest-free loan, in this case for 15 days of $1.8 billion, right? What could you do with $1.8 billion for 15 days? That's essentially the gap in working capital and days to pay that these numbers represent. And what we do is we help you highlight that, capture that, create what that opportunity value looks like. In this case, the annual working capital opportunity of what that represents is $64 million. It's quite a bit of working capital cash flow that you should be leveraging. So these are some of the ways that we use the existing data to continue to move the value chain down the thread and help you find the opportunities, find the gaps, and how we quantify that. And this is an interesting one. This is one where, because we have product data, and oftentimes, for us to do the work, we're now going to be requesting product data, because we've had an interesting challenge where a customer was a distributor that was buying a whole bunch of products from different vendors. And of course, they had their customers that they were giving access to in terms of their catalog. And these customers were essentially buying from the catalog. And of course, they're buying different products from different vendors as they, saw the price and saw the need and whatever volume they wanted and whatever, depending on the criteria of the product and materials, they would buy what they would need. So it's an extremely complex set of permutations of what we buy from our vendors and what we sell to our customers, right? And the thing, there's so much value that was locked in that transaction, right? That world. What we did was we put together a process to group all the like-for-like products. So when you see product assortment recommendation or global product aggregation, this is what we're talking about. Essentially, we're putting together all these different products so that they're like-for-like substitutes, right? So, whether it's material or size or, in cases of, retail products, colors or different functionalities, we make sure to use the right level of product attributes to make sure that we have a group of like-for-like products. And now at that point, we can compare the price, the cost. Maybe there's some promotional and adjustment and funding components tied to that as well. And now we can look at the overall gross margin. And what we're able to recommend to our customers is, instead of selling, in this picture, what we used to sell from this incumbent, your customer used to buy a lot from these guys, a lot of different products. But what we found is that if you use this new combination of vendors A, B, and C, and you can see the kind of product go from that vendor to these different vendors, because we found different products within other vendors that were a good substitute that had better price for your customers and better margin for you. So a really great win-win. And if you can see from the picture, and this is oftentimes the case, what we can do is we can reduce the number of vendors for our customers. We can reduce the number of SKUs and also provide the savings and the margin lift at the same time. So these are some of the really large projects that we run, but one that's made available because of our foundation in our data and the investment that we made to make that available in a meaningful way. So these are some really valuable and large-scale projects that we run that really just brings a tremendous amount of value. And just to summarize sort of kind of how we continue to go down that analytics journey, these are some other examples of things that we can add on because we are able to continue to bring in additional information like stock data, warehouse data, product information, or rebate data, right? We want to make sure that based on the volume and the spend that we're hitting the right rebate threshold and that we're getting the right data, that we're calculating those correctly and making sure that, all of those is happening in a forecasted and repeatable way, that we know exactly what to expect as our rebate payment for the next month or the next quarter or for this year, how it tracks out for the rest of the year, where we can, add additional value. Because if we do that, we can actually take advantage of this large rebate that is right there that otherwise we wouldn't hit. And, within the stock side, obviously the idea here is to make sure that whatever you ordered is sent out and, tracked and received by the warehouse. And oftentimes at the warehouse, right, you need to keep track of what was actually received, what's delayed, were there some issues with the product that we had to send back, were there multiple shipments? Those all create discrepancies in tracking your stock and following that stock. And of course, when you can put that all together, at the end of the day, when the invoice comes from your vendor, you can now confidently say, look, this invoice is wrong because you said you shipped this much out, but in reality, we shipped these guys back. This was delayed but never received. You have the ability to make sure that you're able to tie all the data together to be able to have complete control over your stock and what you're paying for and what you've received, what's in the warehouse. These are all some of the value that we can gain from the analytics that's available from our audit and spend. And so this is just sort of an overall map of kind of how we approach this, right? We start from the bottom left, the simple stuff. We start from the recovery audit claims dashboard, how well we did, how many, how much, who. We start there, and you can see the very next step is to add on that spend analytics component, and we continue to go down that road from there, continue to add on additional data set that allows us to do contract management, DPO, and working capital, and then really get into the valuable and interesting stuff where we're solving complex enterprise challenges using things like TrueNet costs, product aggregation and recommendation. And we have a lot more elements actually that are in development coming down the pipe. And so, as we start to wind down, this is kind of where we are, our journey and kind of what we're trying to get our customers to, right? We start from the bottom left. We start with giving you that overall visibility of your spend, putting that all together, having the access and having the visibility and control. And of course, we're going to automate the calculations, highlight and illustrate important data points, measure and compare everything. And of course, providing the summary and the results of all of that so that it's easy to use, easy to comprehend, very, very important. And I'll say, we're really in the blue area today. Our goal is to really get, that simple elements to looking for gaps and opportunities, automating and simplifying processes, allow you to model different what-if scenarios, bring in benchmarking and recommendations into the process. If we're talking about audits and challenges and problems, of course, using that data to get to the root cause analysis, doing, return on investment analysis, effectiveness, efficiency, getting to all of that. I think these are critical and things that we need to be able to do. And then in the future, forecasting, those are some of the really big topics that we're trying to tackle, and we're really trending in that way. And I think we're trending in that way very quickly and nicely. And to help that matter, we have a separate and dedicated AI labs team in the company that are focusing on some really interesting topic that bring in AI to help solve some really incredibly tough challenges, to be quite fair. And so what we're not doing is we're not investing in, AI as, everything for everyone approach. And this is something that I think is been in the market and been sort of the kind of downfall of what AI truly could be and should be, and some people's expectations of it and how it's been kind of taken, right? AI, it really starts to stem from science fiction, but in reality, when you see vendors and companies start to really project that as this is something that's going to solve your entire world because we're going to suck up all your data and we're going to solve all your problems and it's going to do it automatically. Well, we all know at this point that that is absolutely not true, right? We really need to use AI in a smart and targeted and narrow way to make it work and make it work effectively. And, just to give you two examples of where we're doing that, we're very narrowly focusing on two key important data sets, contracts and emails as a starting point, as an example. So, we mentioned this a few times. Obviously, if you're looking at contracts, there are information captured in contracts that are otherwise not available to us very easily. Of course, you have your spend data and accounts payable data and ERP system data, which are much more tabular and normalized and captured correctly. So those are great. But if you look at the contract side, it's incredibly more complex in terms of the formatting of the type of data because, it's still generated from Word documents and captured in PDFs or images, and the format and context is everywhere. All the wording is different, how you keep track of a price change or even a price rate card, how it's all formatted, completely different. So what we definitely need to do is make sure that we can use technology and AI to really target very important, very specific and pertinent pieces of information so that we can pull that out quickly, efficiently, and usefully so that we don't have to have, armies of people looking at contracts to try to pull all that information because, that would be too much cost for maybe not enough value. And on the other hand, email is another example. I mean, we all know how voluminous emails can be. There's so much of them. There's so much thread. Some are tiny, some are really, really large, and people talk about things in a very different way. And so if we're looking for a specific product and a deal and some key information around that, and those could be even spread across multiple emails, so how the heck do we keep track of all of that? How do we gain value and pick out the right pieces of information from that? So of course, again, what we're not saying is we can read through all your emails and get all the information out that we need to, but what we are doing is setting some very specific and important targets to look for in those emails, which is providing a lot of value. So again, having to have people manually search through the context and the text and the emails, what we're doing is we're leveraging AI to do that for us much faster, more efficiently, and as it gets better, it gets even faster and easier and more accurate. So, that's the benefit that we're trying to gain from that. So again, using technology and especially things like AI and machine learning smartly in a narrowly targeted way so that, again, it's improving what we do, and rather than, a lot wasting or, throwing away a lot of investment that may not have a specific end goal, we're being very focused about it. So with that, one of our last slides. So what are we continuing to try to do? And on the audit side especially, it's to start moving things from recovery to prevention, and that's really important, right? So today, obviously, the model is that when we do recovery activities, we're getting those invoices and payments and the data retroactively, right? We're getting that after the month is over or after the quarter is over so that we can look through it, comb through it, find all the gaps, find the opportunity, find the discrepancies, and submit it. And so from the time that you made the actual erroneous payment to the time that you actually recover it, so you're looking at 60 plus days, right? So that's the value of that cash flow that you didn't have access to, that you didn't have. It's great to get it back, of course, but if I could get that sooner, how great would that be? So our goal is to continue to push our platform and our technology to allow us to help our customers prevent those discrepancies. If we can start to capture that and look for that before that payment's even made and flag that, and of course, for value purposes, we want to record that, but if we can kind of steer the payment, that erroneous payment from even going out the door, that's even more value that we can generate for our customers, and that's certainly kind of where we're heading. So I'll wrap up with these three summary points here. So again, the goal here is, number one, there's tremendous advantages of really joining spend analytics with recovery audit. The path is shared, the data and the purpose of putting all those things together in a comprehensive way to allow you to have access and visibility. And so all of that is highly complementary. And one thing I forgot to mention, a recovery audit is a great way to actually pay for spend analytics and other advanced analytics solutions. So what if the work that you've signed up for could even pay for all these additional value that you can get, but because you're doing both, it could pay for offset the cost. That's an even greater benefit. The way that we're able to do this, and you should really figure out whether your company and your organization has the right infrastructure and the people and the time, and frankly, to be able to do this yourself. The advantage, again, that I had and that I walked into was that we have this purpose-built massive data platform that had been invested in over years to allow access to this massive set of data that, again, to me as an analytics professional, has been tremendously valuable, right? Especially when you can put more pieces of data together, again, smartly and in a meaningful way and for purpose. That's very, very important. When you can do that, you can really get to some valuable answers. And finally, the goal for us and to help our customers always is going to be for us to continue to move from the retroactive to prevention. We want to continue to find additional value for our customers. And again, that starts with that visibility. It starts with having control over your system and your processes and your data. And basically, as I mentioned, it's a complementary target, complementary focus. So I'll stop there and thank you for your time. And what Tim will ask any questions that may have come in from the audiences.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Jen. Great coverage, great topic. If anyone does have additional questions, we've got a few that have come in. You can put those in the questions box in the BrightTalk screen there. So Jen, the first question that's come in is, can the spend analytics solution work if I'm not an audit customer?
Yeah, so for today's purposes, I really focused on how audit and spend analytics work together. But yes, just as I mentioned, I've done this traditionally without the recovery audit set of data for a long time. And yes, we do offer analytics and enterprise data challenge solutions to our non-audit customers as well. But as I mentioned, it's such a great thing to do together. It's something that you'll want to learn about how can it be done together at the same time. And also, yeah, but yes, we can do the spend analytics solutions without being an RA customer.
Great. Jen, you mentioned adding category data. What types of data and analytics were you referring to?
So when you're talking about category data, right? So when you're looking at spend analytics, we're usually starting from AP data, right? So who did we pay and how much and for what purpose? What did we buy? Was it services or products? That's where we start. Those systems and those data points are fairly category agnostic, right? But if you're now getting into specific categories, that's where some additional data sets have additional value. So if you're looking at professional services, you're getting rates, role types, regions of where you're hiring from, and what job specs and levels and hours, markups. So all of that information, benefits. So those are category-specific set of data that will be useful for that service-related category. And there's a lot of insights that you obviously want to be able to generate from that. And of course, travel and logistics and legal these all have different sets of data. You know, for logistics, you're talking about, you know, the types of transport, OTR or ocean or freight, and, you know, where did it go from the origination to endpoint, and what type of, you know, service did we use, what urgency, the rates, the providers, you know, different sets of information for different categories. So what I'm saying is, you know, beyond the sort of category agnostic data that we initially start with from a, you know, invoice and payment standpoint, there are category specific sets that become very valuable depending on a challenge you're trying to solve for those categories, and we can get fairly deep into those specific categories as well.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Couple more coming as well. It seems like a lot of data and a lot of data is joined together. How long does an engagement take?
So it certainly varies by the engagement and the scope, and of course, depending on, you know, how many different systems and sources we're pulling from for our customer, that really dictates the start point. So, you know, best case scenario, right, when we're actually adding on some components where we already have an engagement, where we have our audit customer, and we're adding on things like DPO and working capital application and that module, you know, those can be as quick as 2 to 3 weeks. And imagine, you know, in your world, getting a vendor to come in and deploy a brand new application in a couple of weeks using your own data. I mean, that's an incredibly short time, and that's because, you know, we've already started with your data. We have it, we know it, and we can actually start to kind of deploy that very quickly. But on the front end, to get the recovery audit process up and running, that definitely is I would say a couple of months to essentially make sure that we have a great solid starting point. And the actual work starts immediately. As soon as we start, we ask for some of the key information, and the guys start immediately. But you know, on average, I'll say it ranges starting from 4 to 8 weeks, but depends on how quickly we can get access to your data and how much additional data set we need. And that's the part, you know, really in the beginning that may take the longest. But what we're doing is we're starting to provide value in a staggered way immediately, so that we're not having to wait the entire time before we start producing results. So again, the more data that we already have from you, the faster we can get started. And of course, the more data we're pulling, and, you know, the thing that we want to do is make sure that we're pulling all the right pieces from all the right places so that we can pull it all together. So that's the part we do spend a lot of time on, making sure that we get right.
Great, thanks, Jim. Last question that's come in, which is probably one we get a lot, is what would the key difference be between doing this internally versus PRGX doing it?
Yeah, and this is, you know, it starts from, well, of course, like I myself have started my career doing this internally, right? So I took on the challenges of, look, we have these enterprise challenges, and, you know, we have all these data sets, and we should be able to pull them all together and make sure that they are tied together so that we can access them as we need to, and multiple functions and groups and categories and sourcing managers can have access to them as we need to from a single system, right? But, you know, the time that it took to develop that was really lengthy, because I certainly didn't know all the ins and outs of the data, and how many there were, and how many different ones there were, and how to tie together. And of course, we have to go and invest in the right people and technology to make that all work. So really, it's a matter of, do you already have the technology to ingest the massive amount of data, to put it all together, a technology that allows you to create the right and efficient data models and put together the front end and the insights, which are incredibly important. So what you're leveraging from PRGX is the investment in our infrastructure, our people, the pre-generated, you know, insights and knowledge of, we know where to go very, very quickly because we've done it so much. Of course, those are what you're leveraging. So, you know, it's certainly a combination of, do you have the time? Do you have the people? Do you have the technology? And do you know what you're looking for and how to look for it? And when you do, do you know the insights that are going to be valuable to moving this to the next step? So these are all, I think, all the values that we sort of help bring as a packaged and efficient solution for our customers.
Hey, thanks, Jen. Very generous with your time. We're coming up to the top of the hour, so it's been a lot covered today. So it's been great. Thanks for everyone for joining today's webinar. And just as a reminder, we do have a number of other webinars available on demand. Also, we have one coming up next week around preventive audits for retailers, so dovetailing a lot into what Jen has been speaking about today. But if you have any questions, you can reach out to the team at marketing@prgx.com. And we hope you can join us for future webinars. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.